Hello, and thank you for joining me in this demo for Athena's leadership documentation system. As a company grows, so do the gaps in communication, accountability, and in documentation. HR teams are chasing down forms, calling managers and supervisors trying to get exact details. Supervisors are stuck answering questions they don't have time for. Maybe they're not even completing documentation as they should be. Managers are guessing about what actually happened. Maybe they're spending hours trying to get details from multiple supervisors and employees. And owners are wondering, why does everything feel so disconnected? These phone calls, emails, and tasks can cost companies thousands of dollars because employees are spending time tracking down information that should have already been provided. This is where Athena's leadership documentation system comes into play. So that there's no confusion about what LDS is and what it does, we'll start off by listing what the software is not. Athena's LDS is not a payroll, time tracking, or benefits software. Its primary focus is documentation only. It does one thing, and it does it very well for different kinds of companies. We want to make it clear that this software isn't just for HR personnel. The primary users of this software are going to be supervisors, managers, area managers, HR personnel, and business owners. LDS is a software that can and should be used by all of leadership. There are different account types, and we'll be using a hierarchy diagram to better explain how the software works. We'll start off by logging into an owner account.
For our demo, we'll be using a security company, but LDS works for a range of companies such as staffing agencies, hotels, retail chains, and many more. As soon as you log in, you'll be on the Document Submit tab. You'll see the business name in the center, the account type on the right side, and the logged-in user on the left side. Below, you'll see a list of company employees and their corresponding job title, department, and location. This yellow button is a refresh button if you ever need it. It'll refresh all information. If your company has hundreds of employees, you can search by first name. If you want to see the documentation an employee has, you can double-click their name, and their documentation will appear in the documentation grid below. Let's see if Chris Griffin has any documentation. Looks like he has a couple. On the bottom left, you'll see the date and time an employee was last documented, and on the right, you'll see how many documentation entries there are. If the notes are too long, you can expand the column, or you can double-click the notes, and a pop-up will appear with all the information within that column. If you want to see an employee's documentation, you can click on the documentation, save it on your computer, and then view it. You can do the same for if a rebuttal was added. The documentation process is very simple, and one of LDS's feature is input validation. These types of validations are in place for all required information. Let's submit an attendance documentation for our employee, Stan Smith. Violation type will be attendance. If you don't see a violation type that fits the situation, there's always the other violation type. Input validation makes sure that whoever is submitting documentation isn't leaving out any information. For example, if we have documentation to submit and we clicked yes, but we don't choose a file, LDS will alert us as to what's missing. Now, sometimes documentation might not be needed, so if we select that there isn't documentation to upload, we are prompted to state why. For this example, we'll select that we do have documentation to upload, and yes for having issued the documentation to the employee. For the purposes of legal compliance, most companies require that their employees sign any documentation that was given to them. We'll select that this employee signed the documentation, but if we select no, you'll see that you're again prompted to state why documentation wasn't issued. Sometimes employees want to submit a rebuttal, and if they do, you can upload the rebuttal as well. We'll select this rebuttal file. The incident date allows you to select when a violation occurred. If you take a look at the documentation grid below, you'll see that there's a submitted date and also an incident date. The incident date is when the violation occurred, and the submitted date is when the employee who issued the documentation actually submitted it. The submitted date cannot be changed. This is for integrity reasons. For example, say an employee crashes a vehicle on a Monday. The incident date would be on Monday. A manager tells a supervisor that documentation needs to be issued by the end of the day. The supervisor, for whatever reason, doesn't issue the documentation until Friday, but tells his manager that he submitted it on the same day. The manager can look at the documentation grid and see exactly when the supervisor submitted the documentation. The Notes section is for the issuer to input notes regarding the violation. Notes are required, so if the issuer doesn't provide notes, the issuer will be reminded. For this case, we'll add, Stan was late by 45 minutes. Once the issuer has provided all the needed information, the documentation can be submitted. A couple things to mention. The documentation process follows a hierarchy structure. For example, a supervisor cannot document other supervisors or anyone above them. In fact, other supervisors will not be shown to the logged-in supervisor. This applies to managers, area manager, and HR personnel. Only an owner account can see all employees. If an HR personnel or any other job title needs to have access to all the employees, access can be given to them by expanding their job title. We'll go into this in a little bit. Another example, an area manager won't see other area managers in the list of employees. The logged-in employee will only ever see their subordinates unless their account type is an owner account type or unless they've been given access to the other employees. Let's move on to the Create tab. For an owner account, the Create tab allows an owner to create locations, departments, job titles, and employees. There's a rename section here where if you need to rename a location, department, or job title, you're welcome to do so. Let's go ahead and create a location. We'll call it California Building 1. Department name will be Operations Department. And for our job title, we'll select a regular employee. We'll name this job title Security Officer. If, for example, your company is a dealership, maybe a regular employee job title would be a sales associate or a mechanic. Really depends on the company structure. This is one of the great features of LDS. Because of the way that it's made, you can really use this software for any company you may have. Once we've created the job title, we can create an employee for it. You don't need to do all these steps every time you want to create an employee. If your job title is already created, you can just create an employee. Let's go ahead and create an employee. We'll call him John Doe. The employee ID is used to keep track of employees. It must be between 4 to 6 digits. We'll enter 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 3 letters here are your company's prefix. If you're new to LDS, you may be thinking that you don't want to do this process for the 1,000 employees your company has. The good news is that you don't have to. Athena's leadership documentation system is just for documenting. If you have over 1,000 employees, statistically speaking, at worst, most companies document only about 25% of their workforce. So if you have 1,000 employees, you're only looking at 250 accounts, and you don't need to create them. A supervisor can create them when documentation is needed. It's important to mention that the Create tab is accessible to supervisors, managers, area managers, and HR personnel. However, only an owner account type can create locations, departments, job titles, and rename them. All other accounts can only create employees. For example, a supervisor can create an employee in the Create tab, but they can't do anything else. For security purposes, the creation of owner accounts is not allowed to other owners. If you want to create multiple owner accounts, you'll have to contact Athena Force. This is because owner accounts have a lot more permissions. Once an owner account is created, they can also request other owner accounts. Since we're on the subject of creating employees, we have to talk about pricing. Athena Force does not charge for the number of locations, departments, job titles, or documents submitted. You can be the biggest company in the world, and you wouldn't be charged for having 100 locations, 100 departments, or 1,000 job titles. Athena Force only bills for the allotted number of accounts. You're welcome to view our pricing at athenaforce.com. Let's move on to the Employees tab. The Employees tab is only accessible to managers, area managers, HR personnel, and owners. Supervisors do not have access to this tab. In this tab, you can promote and demote employees, and you can expand a job title access to other departments. You can also rename employees and change their passwords. Again, you can only do this to subordinates. Let's start with promoting. Let's say that our security officer, Lois Lane, has been doing a great job and she'll be promoted to a supervisor. She will now need access to Athena's LDS so that she can document regular employees. We'll select her name, and then from the drop-down box, we'll select the job title that we'll be promoting her to. In this case, she'll be the supervisor at our California Building 1 location. Now you'll see that I've gotten an error message. This is because regular employees do not have access to Athena's LDS. Regular employees can only be documented. When you promote a regular employee to a leadership position, you'll need to create them a password. So let's do that. Now let's say that we'd like to demote Philip J. Fry from a supervisor to an employee. We'll select his name, select the security officer job title, and click the Promote Demote button. You see that we get a message indicating that he was demoted and that his access to the software has been revoked. Philip J. Fry will no longer be able to log into Athena's LDS. Moving on to expanding a job title's permission. I'll be using this hierarchy diagram to explain what expanding is. Different businesses have different organizational structures. In one business, you may have a supervisor who's only ever in one location or a specific department. In other businesses, you may have a supervisor who's at multiple locations depending on where they're needed. This is where expanding comes into play. By default, a supervisor, manager, area manager, and HR personnel only have access to the departments their job title has access to. It's important to remember that permissions to departments are assigned to job titles and not to employees. For example, you have a supervisor that needs to be able to document employees in a department they're not in. You'll need to expand their job titles to the department they need access to. The supervisors in this box all have the job title of a supervisor. This job title is in the operations department of Building 1 located in California. Let's take security supervisor Lois Lane, for example. When Lois Lane logs into Athena's LDS, she'll only see the 50-plus security officers in Building 1. She will not see the 50-plus security officers in Building 2. If her company allows her to document officers in Building 2, the job title she's under will need to be expanded. Let's do that. We'll select Lois Lane, select the department she needs access to, and click Expand. Now notice that Supervisor Stan Marsh and Supervisor Summer Smith are now also under the California location Building 2. This is because, as stated before, permissions are given to job titles and not to employees. What happens is that we've granted access to all the employees who are under the supervisor title to Building 2. To show this visually, this is what happens. So what if you have two supervisors and only one of them needs access to another department? What you should do is create a job title, maybe call it Building 1 Supervisors, and then assign the supervisors who will only be supervisors in that department. Then, your supervisor's job title who does need access to multiple departments or locations can be expanded, and only that supervisor will have access. The great thing about permissions being assigned to job titles and not employees is that if you have an employee that is getting promoted to a supervisor position, you don't need to give that employee permissions to all the departments or locations they'll need access to. You simply promote them, and they will already have the same permissions as the supervisors who are already in that job title. Hopefully, expanding is making sense. If not, please contact us at athenaforce.com. We'll answer any and all questions you may have. A couple other things to mention. The promoting and expanding features also follow a hierarchy structure. You can't promote or demote yourself. You can't promote others to your job title. For example, a manager can't make someone else a manager. An area manager will need to do that. The rename and password reset work the same way. You click an employee, and you can rename them or reset their password. The subscription tab is only available to owner accounts. This tab provides information regarding the subscription. It displays when the subscription started, if auto-renew is set, the renewal interval type, and when the subscription is set to end or renew. The max allotted section shows the max number of account types you can create. The current usage section shows the number of accounts you're currently using. If you're ever wondering which employees falls under which account type, you can view employees by their account type using this drop-down section. Let's say we'd like to know which employees are our supervisors. You would click on the drop-down list, select the account type, and you will then see a list of employees and their corresponding departments that they have access to. If you only want to see their names and not their departments, you can uncheck the Show All Departments checkbox, and you will only be presented with the employee names. This concludes our demo for Athena's leadership documentation system. Please visit us at athenaforce.com if you have any questions. Thank you.